Hi, and welcome to my library. This is Wendy Murdoch, and I'm here to read you from one of my favorite books today. It's called Understanding Equitation by St Fort Paillard. But the piece that I really want to talk about today is his section on what's called the role of the lower back. And I have read this section at my clinics many times because I think that Jean clearly defines this in a way that expresses it better than I ever could. And so I defer to him in terms of the clarity with which he writes in the role of the lower back. Everyone agrees on the capital importance in good riding of the role allocated to the rider's lower back. Everyone also agrees that this role is a dual one, for it influences both the quality of the rider's seat and the effectiveness of his actions for producing impulsion. However, due to the prevalence of certain false ideas on the subject, it seems to me worthwhile to analyze just why and how the muscles of the lumbar region can ensure this double function, once more respecting the principles that a preliminary understanding of a problem, even a strictly physical one such as this, is a condition or at least an aid to its sound solution. As far as the seat is concerned, we have already described the lower back movements that the rider should make in order to ensure the proper unity between his own mass and that of the horse in action. And I will go back and have a chapter on that. We'll do that in a reading at some point, but it is not so pertinent to where we are right now. So there is no need to repeat them here, but surprise and dismay are provoked by the fact that they are so seldom taught. And he's talking about the role of the lower back movements, the type of movements you need in order to unify with the horse. Some instructors think they are giving their pupils the key to the problem by telling them that their lower back should act like a spring. However, despite a certain semblance, this comparison is completely false. After having been distorted, a spring reacts with a force equal to that force that distorted it, resuming exactly its original form. The lower back obviously does not possess this characteristic of elasticity, nor does any other part of the human body for that matter. The lower back is composed of the pelvic bones, the lumbar vertebrae, and the first dorsal vertebrae, all of which constitute its inert framework, and they are cased in a complex of muscles and tendons that ensure the maintenance of this framework in a given form, or its adjustment, in other words, its movement. Of course, the muscles and tendons possess an elasticity of their own, which ensures the supple maintenance of the body's equilibrium and positions, as well as support of its weight. This elasticity contributes to the adjustment of the permanent and unconscious state of demi-contraction that is called muscle tone. But it is extremely limited and quite insufficient in the case that concerns us here. The muscles do, however, have the ability to contract, and their contractions, which alone are capable of producing movements of the degree required in this case, depend on the cerebrospinal nervous system, which in turn is governed by the rider's will. Sounds like Feldenkrais, doesn't it, when we're talking about the thoughts actually controlling the body and that we need to understand good function. When the rider's lower back seems to be acting automatically like a spring, the fact is that the rider causes it to make movements of flexion and straightening, which we have already mentioned as being necessary for establishing unity with the horse. Establishing unity with the horse therefore means deliberately affecting the movements that are exactly complementary to those of the horse. Technically, it is very much like ballroom dancing, at least in dances in which the girl is supposed to follow closely the lead of her partner. A good dancer, who is relaxed and thus perfectly supple, performs steps and movements that are exactly complementary to those of her partner, in the exact rhythm of the music, taking care not to overdo it. Horrors! Exclamation point, and that's in parentheses right there. In other words, do not do more than he does. She thus establishes unity not with her partner, which would tend to make her cling to him tensely, horrors again, but unity with his steps, his movement, in short, with his dancing. She is then light in his arms. She is a good dancer. A good rider should behave with his horse in a similar way. He should perform movements that are perfectly complementary to those he feels from his partner horse, and in exactly the same rhythm, taking care not to overdo it, which would be useless, unattractive, and even troublesome to his partner. He thus does not establish unity with the horse's body, which would tend to make him tighten his legs by muscular contractions, and this inevitably spreading to the lumbar region would reduce its suppleness. He establishes unity with the horse's movements, in this case with the movements of its back that result from its gaits. The rider thus must employ a veritable ballroom dancing technique, which might be called the dance of the lower back, with the same requirements of active suppleness, rhythm, and harmony. Isn't it rather surprising that this, quote, dance of the lower back, unquote, as essential as it is to the establishment of unity, without which a good seat is impossible, is not the object of any systematic instruction? Instead of that, what do we see in almost every riding school? Beginners, obviously more or less severely shaken up as soon as the horse goes into a trot, instinctively tighten their legs in order to stay on, which is quite natural. As a result, they more or less contract the back, with which no one has told them what to do anyway. They thus absorb all the shocks, and only the force they apply in the enveloping the horse's body with their legs prevents them from being thrown too high out of the saddle. Then, in the best of cases, and by means of more or less inappropriate exercises, they are persuaded to yield to these shocks, to become, quote, supple, unquote, as it is erroneously expressed. But they are not told that they must untighten their thighs, nor how they should try to bring the lower back into play. So still, in the best of cases, the shocks become soft instead of sharp, which is obviously an improvement. But there are still shocks, and consequently, no unity with the horse. Afterward, it is every man for himself, or woman, for the role of the instructor generally stops at this point in regard to this particular subject. Some young riders, only a few as it is easy to see, instinctively discover for themselves the trick that enables them to avoid this disagreeable, tiring, and useless bouncing up and down. The rest find their personal solution in resignation, habit, hardening, and in the development of their thigh muscles in order to give them, quote, gripping power, unquote, as they used to say. In the long run, and at the price of soreness and even abrasions, they can become firm in the saddle. But a good seat, supple and united, which is necessary for the practice of a good quality of equitation, will always remain a mystery to them. In good quality equitation, it is not only a matter of being firm in the saddle, but of being in the saddle in such a way that it is possible to apply the aids with all the independent precision, firmness, and eventually finesse that permit the exercise of a good command over the horse. And since the secret of this way resides essentially in the unity of the rider's seat with the horse's movements, it is logical to conclude that the lower back also plays a complementary role of great importance in the quality, thus in the effectiveness of the rider's aids. So I love this section because this is really the thing that I start with when I'm teaching riding, is that the very first thing I start with is the rider's lower back, and aligning that lower back in the correct position so that it releases the tension around the hips. And then, of course, the next step is getting the rider to let go of all the habitual patterns that they've developed as a result of that incorrect lower back position. And as I said, this discussion here, I have yet to see written in any other book that explains it the way St Fort Paillard does. And it's so beautifully written. So please leave me a comment below. Let me know what you think of this selection. If you've read his book or have a copy, let me know about that. And what was your favorite part? And if you have any other questions or subject that you'd like me to talk about, just leave that in the comments below. Thanks. Till next time.